The video that you are about to watch is designed for Burroughs technicians who are performing ATEC TCR installs for Truist and who may not have interacted with an ATEC TCR yet. So if you're able to understand this training and repeat the same thing during the training part of the install, it will satisfy all of the Truist ATEC training requirements. Let's get started. Any good video starts with how to turn the machine on and how to turn the machine off. Not in frame, there's also a power supply on the side or the back of the machine, and it will have a master power supply or a master power switch on it. That obviously would need to be in the on position before anything would happen. So you would start with making sure that that is turned on. From there, a teller or a technician would go up to a machine that's off, the screen is off, and it starts with making sure that the master power switch, this rocker switch, is turned on, followed by pressing and holding the round power button. And you'll do that until these teller lights on both sides turn solid, and then you can release the button, and that will initiate the start process. We'll go over to this other machine that's already on, and we'll show you how to do the power off sequence. So you'll do the same thing in reverse. You'll press and hold the round button that's below the master power switch. You'll get an on-screen display that asks you what to do, cancel, close, restart, and shut down. So the two options that you're really going to use are either shut down or restart. Pressing close will close out of the TCR application, and you'll only be left with the option of power failing the machine. So we don't ever want to use close. So in this case, I'm just going to select shutdown, and the machine will go through a shutdown process. That is startup and shutdown of an ATEC TCR. The second part of this video and the checklist is to help a Truist teammate clear a jam. The TCR will come with 3 sets of keys. It requires a key to open the vault cover door so that we can rack out the system. There is a tutorial video on the screen. We'll come back to that at the end, but it shows these steps in an abbreviated fashion. So we'll start with the key. We'll open the door. Just like most business machines, any place that has green tape on it is safe to move and touch. So this starts with a green lever. We'll pull that down and we'll pull the entire upper out. It's also important to note that the instructions for opening this and closing this are also printed here. It's not anything that you or a teller should memorize. Just important to know that if you don't remember how to do it, the instructions are printed right here. So each module in general has a latch and a handle. An example of that is using the instructions is A1 up. That would be the latch. The handle is back here, which is A3 up. The next device, D10 up, only has a handle. This one is the most difficult for tellers to see. And by the way, they'll be standing where you are, right? You want them on the left side of the machine. That's what we call the fun side of the machine, so that they can see all these things. This actually says B1 push. It's bladed towards where you'll be standing, so it's hard to see. So we'll push this down and we'll separate out the divert bin. And the last step of this is just C3 up. So we'll pull that up, and this really exposes the lower bill path, which is difficult to see from this point, the middle bill path, which is where the bill validator is and the center is, and then the upper bill path. So not super important to tell for tellers, but as you guys work on these machines, the upper bill path is always moving towards the front of the machine, the middle bill path is always moving towards the back of the machine, and the lower bill path is always moving towards the front of the machine. They never change directions, they only go in those directions. The next part of this is how you would actually go about looking for a jam. So we'll try to put a picture in here, but what you will see is on the front of the screen, there'll be a sensor view, and we'll show you with a red light the approximate position of where the jam is. And so an example of that is, if we have a bill jam in the middle bill path around the bill validator, this unit is moving 12 notes per second. So it's not just the one note that you're gonna find, there'll be several other notes behind it. So we'll take a look at the bill validator, we'll open that up, and we see a couple of notes in here. I'm gonna leave the notes in here because I wanna demonstrate something to you later when we turn this machine on. You'll also see a note in this subassembly module, and I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but there is another note like in this section. So it would be up to a teller to remove each of those notes, and any notes that are not in a cassette are not counted as the inventory of the TCR at this point. So they wouldn't be visible in Enterprise Teller or the TCR. They're outside of the cassettes. While we're here talking about the bill validator, there's a weekly cleaning that needs to occur that the teller should do. And that is as simple as grabbing a cloth, opening the bill validator, and what you'll see is there are 2 glass screens on the top of the bill validator and 2 glass screens on the bottom. And so we'll just simply wipe those screens on the bottom, and then we'll flip the rag over and we'll wipe the 2 screens on the top. There's one additional metal strip at the back of the top that we'll also wipe. And that is a teller cleaning at that point. We'll close the bill validator. It's important not to slam it, but we do want to use our thumb or finger to make sure that it is securely closed, right? So that is the proper way to close the bill validator. Closing the system up is just the reverse of how we opened it. So we'll close the upper module, we'll close the divert bin, and then we'll ride this kickstand all the way down until the middle module and the cam are in their home position, and then we'll close the TCR and lock it into place. This next section, we're going to talk about the vault portion of the TCR. We're going to combine some things. The tellers will actually do something called a biweekly cash count. They may call it an audit, but they're going to need to access the first cassette in there that they call the collection cassette. So this starts with opening the vault. In your case, it's just going to be a series of 6 digits. So we enter the combination, we rotate the the vault lock clockwise, and we open the vault. And while we're here, we might as well have a quick discussion on closing the vault. So once the vault is opened, it is important to teach tellers to push in the handle and then close it. If you don't push in the handle, you really can't close that. Only then, can you rotate the lock back counterclockwise and lock it. So let's open that up again. So now our vault is open. For the biweekly cash count, they will need to manually empty the collection bin. To expose the collection bin, we're going to press the button on the left-hand side of the lower tray. This is something that the tellers will need to understand how to do as part of their biweekly cash count process. So one of the last steps of the biweekly cash count in Enterprise Teller will be that they will click a button that says empty, and that is in a section labeled manual, and the collection bin is in that section. So the steps are they'll click it as empty, they'll check mark it, they'll click it as empty. Enterprise Teller will spin, and then they will open the vault, expose the collection bin, and they will remove it from the TCR. They'll have to use the key as well, right? So they need the key to open the door. They'll need the combination to get into the vault, and then they'll need the key again to get inside of the collection bin. So once they are inside, this is again still part of the biweekly cash count. They'll remove whichever cash is in there by pushing down on the green part of the tape. It'll lock at the bottom, and then they'll remove the cash, close the bin, return it to its position, and push it back into the machine, and they will close the vault. We're going to leave it open at this point. At that point, they will need to enter into Enterprise Teller exactly the cash that they got out of the collection bin. Moving forward, as part of your demo, you're going to use the key to expose all 6 of the cassettes that are in the lower cassette tray. What's important to teach them is the function of the collection bin, which really handles any overflows. So if you have too many 5s or too many 1s or too many 20s, then those notes will flow in to the collection bin. You'll take care of that during a biweekly cash count would be the ideal time to take care of that. And there are instructions on their system, their knowledge management system called Acadia, that does that. You can also run the TCR with the cassettes in any configure or any location. It's a great way to troubleshoot for you as a technician. It's great for the tech or the tellers as well. The only 2 cassettes that have to be in a specific place is the collection bin has to be first, and the split cassette has to be last, only because the split cassette won't fit in any other location. If the bank finds itself in a situation where the ones cassette is broken and you don't have one on your truck, then they should just set it aside, close the machine, and let it run. It will not be able to dispense ones, but it will be able to take ones, and they will flow directly into the collection bin. As part of your demo, again, you will only do this with the collection bin. You won't do this with any other cassette because it will have money. And if you do this with a cassette with money in it, you will get a manipulated cassette. And that is a cassette that has an exclamation point. We'll show you a picture of that in a second, but that's a cassette that has an exclamation point, and any cash that's in it would be represented as a bar graph off to the right, and that bar graph would be red as well. So again, we should be using the collection cassette as we do this demo of a general cassette, but anything on the screen, we can push it down, we can move the cash to the bottom, it will lock there. You can also demonstrate that if a bill were somewhat stuck into the cassette, that you would use, I'm trying to get this in a position where you can see, you would use this silver wheel, and that would allow you to roll money into, it's kind of hard to do one-handed, that would allow you to roll money into or out of the cassette. So if you were to see a cassette that had a note that was partially stuck, instead of removing it manually, you would want to move the motor so that you don't tear it and you don't cause a bigger problem. As a quick example, again, this is more for you than it is for presenting to the tellers. I don't think it's worth manipulating the cassette to show them the difference between a split cassette, but so you'll know, this is what a split cassette looks like. It carries two denoms. It's very similar to the cassette that we just saw, slightly different. It's not spring-loaded, it won't go back up, it'll just stay where it's moved. You'll have to push that back to the top when you're done. And rather than having the silver wheel that you can turn, it has a plastic wheel on the outside. And then the only other difference is it also has a bill path that feeds the lower denomination. So the general cassette doesn't have that, only the split cassette does. Replacing all the cassettes, they'll always go in so that the handle folds back towards the TCR. To rack in the cassettes, we'll simply push this back in, you'll hear it and feel it lock into place. And then from there, we'll really just close the vault. In closing the vault, what's important here is that if we don't teach the tellers to push in the handle and then close, they will have a really hard time doing that. You can move the machine trying to close that before it'll move. So that must go in. And then the last part of this is if the handle is not all the way in the fully upper position, then you will not be able to close the lock. And we have tellers that call us in tears saying they've entered their combination dozens of times, but they still can't close the lock. Well, you don't need to enter your combination to close the lock. This just needs to be in the fully upright position, so you may need to support that while you turn that fully counterclockwise. And then you're done with the lower vault position. If you do find yourself with a manipulated cassette, and there's several of them that you see here, the 1s, the 10s, and the 50s are all manipulated, and you can tell that because it has the red exclamation point, and all of the bar graph to the right of that will be red as well. The only way to do that is in a bi-weekly cash count. So again, it is a status. It is not an error. The machine will run just fine. We often make a joke about that and say that machines don't trust people and people don't trust machines. So manipulated just means the TCR can't be sure of its inventory because the cassette has been opened, and it won't be sure until you do the bi-weekly cash count. One other thing to note on the screen is you also see reject and collection say E, and that just means they're empty. They don't have any notes in them. There's one other state that we'll show you with a picture where there's just a white box with a black X, and that just means the cassette is not present in the TCR. This is an example of a jam, and it's important to note that there are about 4 pieces of information on the screen that are important to us. One is you'll see that there's a 3-digit error code and a 4-digit error code. The 4-digit is the one that we really need as technicians to be prepared for whatever we might find on site. So it would be great if before rolling a truck or being on site that you could know what the error code is. In addition to that, it does give us some text of what that error code is down below. That's really for tellers and not really for technicians. Additionally, it shows us with a red dot where this jam is, or at least where part of this jam is. So this is in a difficult place. This is right above a cassette. This is probably one of the worst places that you could have a jam, just because you really have to look underneath the upper bill path or the lower bill path to see where that is. And then the last thing that is displayed here to us is this play sign, which it actually shows us a video, the teller's a video of how they would open up the TCR and where they would go to look for that error. And it specifically tells them each thing to open. This is just like what we ran through as we went through the upper part. What I really want to show you though is the first thing that you should do, or that we should instruct a teller to do in this situation, is to press the reset button. It is possible that the TCR will purge itself of all notes that are in it. So we'll give that a second. We'll speed this up some, see what we get. All right, so as you can see from that, we did get some notes out of the machine. These are the notes that we spread out as we were showing jam clearance. We're just gonna press reset again and see if we can get the rest of that out. It is possible that we can. Okay. It appears that we still have jam here. We're going to do 3 strikes and we're out, right? One more press of that and we'll see if we can get it out. No. So this jam would require, let's see if we can show you what this would require. So in our case, the door is already open. It's telling us that the jam is down here above the second cassette. We're just gonna rack this out. The first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look into the slot. I don't see anything in the second slot. And so this requires a little bit of undignified behavior, right? You're gonna need to take a knee, a teller's gonna need to take a knee and take a look down here and sure enough, here's what we find, right? We find this note and we're gonna open this diverter and take a look and see if there's anything else in there. There isn't. So we can close that at this point. We'll take this note and set it aside, and we'll close the TCR, and we're going to go ahead and hit reset one more time and see if that cleared all of our issues or if there's still something else in there. Okay, you can tell from the sounds it's making that did clear the last error and that we expect a good boot at this point. Going to speed this up a little. Okay, this example brings up the last thing that there is to tell a teller, which is possession of cash. So in that example, if we had been doing a dispense, then all of the money that we did take out of the machine was already out of the cassettes. And so that would be customer money if it were a dispense. What would more than likely happen is that the teller would have completed the dispense out of her drawer, right? And so after dealing with the customer, fixing him or her and making that right, they would then take that cash that they got, make sure there's no other cash in the machine, and put that in their drawer, because they actually would have taken care of the dispense from their drawer, and this is the dispense that came out of the machine. So in that case, they would be close to whole. It's possible that the TCR could be over some amount and their drawer could be under by the same amount because of that. If, on the other hand, it was a deposit, then the money that we just took out of the machine is not counted as part of that deposit. It is still outside of the cassettes and therefore not included in the TCR's inventory or enterprise teller inventory. So the teller would redeposit that money probably in her drawer, and any other part of the deposit that already happened, then in this case, the TCR would be in balance and the drawer would be in balance, because she would tell enterprise teller that part of it was a machine or a TCR deposit and the other part was a manual deposit. Okay, I think that covers teller training on day of install at Truist.